Imagine waking up tomorrow and someone asks you a simple question. Draw your country. Not perfectly, just the shape, the coastline, where the mountains sit, where the rivers run. You could probably do it. Rough maybe, but recognizable. Now imagine you couldn't. Not because you're bad at drawing, because you have never, in your entire life, seen it. No satellite photo, no globe, no app on your phone that shows a little blue dot moving through a world already mapped down to the meter. For almost the entire span of human existence, that was reality. Not a strange exception, the rule. You were born in a village. You grew up in that village. You would very likely die in that village. And if someone asked you what your country looked like, what shape it was, how big, what lay beyond the next range of hills, you would have no idea. Not a vague idea. No idea at all. So here's the question that should bother you. How did entire civilizations function like this? How did armies march? How did kings rule lands they'd never seen? How did anyone agree on where their territory even ended? Stick with me, because the answer is stranger and more human than you'd expect. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Most people today assume ancient humans had some kind of mental map. Blurry, maybe. Inaccurate, sure, but something. A sense of we're here, the enemy is there, the coast is that way. That assumption is wrong. For most of history, the average person's entire geographic knowledge extended about as far as they could walk in a day. Maybe two. Beyond that, nothing. Not blankness exactly, something closer to myth. Ask a farmer in the 1200s what lay 200 miles north and he wouldn't shrug. He'd tell you a story. Maybe there were giants there. Maybe the world simply ended. Maybe dragons. Not because people were foolish, because there was no way to know. Think about what a map actually requires. Someone has to travel the land, measure it, remember it, represent it accurately on a flat surface at a consistent scale, so someone else, a total stranger, can look at it and understand a place they've never been. That's one of the most cognitively demanding things a civilization can attempt. And here's the part that really breaks the assumption. Even the rulers often didn't know. Kings taxed provinces they'd never laid eyes on. Emperors sent armies toward borders that existed more as rumors than lines. Entire empires were run on second-hand descriptions, passed mouth to mouth, each version a little less accurate than the last. So if nobody had the picture, how did anyone find anything? Here's where it gets uncomfortable. You might be thinking, okay, fine, but surely explorers, traders, and messengers found their way around somehow. So there must have been some system. There was, and it was terrifying. Picture yourself as a merchant in the 9th century. You've been told there's a market 300 miles east, across 2 rivers and a mountain pass. You have no map, you have no compass, not yet, not for a few more centuries in most of the world. What you have is a set of instructions, memorized, passed down from someone who made the trip once. Follow the river until you see the Twin Hills. Turn where the burned tree stands. Camp near the 3rd stream, not the 2nd. The 2nd runs dry in summer. That's the entire navigation system. If the burned tree fell down, if the stream you were counting on turned out to be number 2, not number 3, if a storm knocked you off the path for even a day, you were lost, truly lost. Not lost the way we mean it now, phone dead, mildly annoyed, asking a stranger for directions. Lost as in, no one on Earth outside a 50-mile radius knows where you are, and no one is coming to look for you, because no one else knows the terrain either. This is the part most people never sit with. Being lost, historically, wasn't an inconvenience. It could be a death sentence. And it happened constantly. So how did anyone solve this? The first instinct might be the stars. Ancient people navigated by the stars, right? Partly true, but here's the twist. The stars tell you direction. North, south, east, west. They don't tell you distance. They don't tell you what's between you and your destination. Knowing you're heading north doesn't help if there's an impassable swamp exactly north of you that a local could have warned you about. Direction without local knowledge is only half a solution. So civilizations turned to something else, something almost overlooked today. Memory. Human memory, trained and specialized to an extraordinary degree, became the first map. Certain people in every ancient society became walking atlases. Traders who'd made a route 40 times. Elders who could recite from memory every landmark between 2 cities. The shape of a hill, the smell near a certain marsh, the exact bend in a river where the current turned dangerous. This sounds almost unbelievable by modern standards. We can't remember a phone number. These people held entire regional geographies in their heads, encoded not as coordinates but as stories. That's the key detail people miss. Ancient geographic knowledge wasn't stored as data. It was stored as narrative. Walk until the river forks like a snake's tongue. The left path belongs to the dead, don't take it. The right path will bring you to the village of the Red Cliffs by nightfall. Notice what's happening there. It's not a map. It's a myth with GPS coordinates hidden inside it. Superstition and survival information fused together. Because a story is far easier to remember and far harder to forget than a plain instruction. This is one of the most overlooked truths in human history. Before maps, myths were maps. Land travel was hard. The ocean was a nightmare. At least on land, there are landmarks, rivers, mountains, trees that don't move. The sea offers nothing. Every direction looks identical. There's no path to memorize because the path is water, and water doesn't hold a shape. So how did early sailors, the ones who crossed vast stretches of open ocean thousands of years before compasses existed, find their way? This is where the story gets genuinely astonishing. Pacific Islanders, navigating between islands separated by hundreds of miles of open water, developed a system so sophisticated that modern scientists are still studying it today. They read the ocean itself, the direction and pattern of swells, the way waves bounced and refracted off islands they couldn't yet see, sometimes from over 20 miles away. The color of the water, the behavior of birds. Certain species fly out to sea in the morning to fish and return toward land each evening, meaning a bird at dusk is a compass pointing home. They memorize star paths, not just north, but the exact rising and setting points of dozens of individual stars across an entire night, each one confirming the boat's heading as the sky rotated overhead. No instruments, no paper, no margin for error. And they crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific Ocean, a distance most people today can barely comprehend without an airplane, using nothing but memorized patterns and an intimate reading of the natural world. Here's the detail that should stop you cold. This knowledge was never written down, not because people didn't value it, because it couldn't be written down. It lived in songs, chants, and rigorous oral training passed from master navigator to apprentice over years. Lose the navigator and you lose the map permanently, which means somewhere in history, entire maps, irreplaceable, life-saving knowledge of ocean routes simply vanished because the one person who held them in their memory died before passing it on. Think about that, a map that could die. We don't have that fear anymore. Delete an app and you can re-download it in 10 seconds. But once an entire civilization's geographic knowledge lived inside the mind of a single aging expert, and if he didn't have time to teach it, it was gone forever. Eventually, someone had an idea that would change everything. What if you didn't have to remember it? What if you could draw it? The earliest known maps aren't what you'd expect. They weren't accurate. They weren't even trying to be geographically correct in the way we understand today. A Babylonian clay tablet from roughly 2,600 years ago, often cited as one of the oldest surviving maps, shows the world as a flat disk, with Babylon proudly placed at the exact center, surrounded by a ring of water, beyond which lay regions labeled, essentially, as unknown and dangerous. This wasn't ignorance. This was the honest limit of what anyone could know. Notice the psychology hiding in that map. Whoever is in the center believes they are the center. Every early civilization that attempted a map put themselves in the middle of it. Babylon at the center of the Babylonian map, China calling itself the Middle Kingdom, medieval European maps placing Jerusalem at the center of the known world. Nobody was being deliberately arrogant. They simply couldn't imagine otherwise. If you've never seen the whole picture, of course you assume your small piece of it is the whole story. This is the first real crack in the mystery. Maps weren't just navigation tools. They were the first attempt in human history to answer a much bigger question. Where do I actually fit in the world? And for thousands of years, nobody could answer that question honestly because nobody had seen enough of the world to know. Here's where the story escalates. Say a civilization finally produces a decent regional map. Coastlines roughly right, major rivers marked, mountain ranges sketched in with reasonable accuracy. New problem copying it. Every single map for most of human history had to be copied by hand. No printing press, no photocopier. A scribe working by candlelight, tracing lines from one parchment to another, for hours, for days. Now imagine that scribe is tired, or careless, or simply misjudges a curve in a coastline by a few degrees. That error doesn't stay small. It gets copied again and again. Each new version inherits the mistakes of the last, plus a few new ones. Over a few generations, a map that started out reasonably accurate can drift into something closer to fiction, while everyone using it still believes it's the truth. This actually happened. For centuries, European maps depicted a massive, mythical southern continent, Terra Australis, not because anyone had seen it, but because ancient philosophers assumed the Earth needed a landmass in the south to balance the known continents in the north. That imagined continent got copied onto map after map, growing more detailed with each version, more confidently drawn, more convincingly real, despite the fact that nobody had ever actually been there. Let that sink in. For hundreds of years, one of the most trusted tools humans had for understanding their world contained a landmass that existed almost entirely in someone's imagination, inherited copy after copy, until it looked like established fact. If that could happen with continents, imagine what happened to smaller details: rivers that didn't exist, villages relocated by a careless pen stroke, mountain ranges stretched, shrunk, or placed in entirely the wrong location. For most of history, having a map didn't mean having the truth. It meant having someone's best guess, filtered through generations of human error. We need to sit with this for a moment, because modern life has completely erased what lost used to mean. Today, if you take a wrong turn, your phone buzzes within seconds, recalculating, mild annoyance, maybe you're 5 minutes late. For most of human history, getting lost could mean wandering for days without water. It could mean walking directly into hostile territory with no idea you'd crossed a border, because borders themselves were often invisible, unmarked, understood only by the people who'd lived there their whole lives. Entire military campaigns collapsed not because of superior enemy forces, but because an army got disoriented in unfamiliar terrain and simply never arrived where it was supposed to be. Entire trade caravans vanished, not necessarily to bandits or disaster, but simply because they walked the wrong direction for one day too many, and by the time anyone realized, there was no way back. This is the hidden cost behind almost every historical achievement we celebrate. Every great voyage of discovery. You've heard of Magellan, Zheng He, the Vikings reaching North America, carried an almost unbearable risk hiding underneath the glory. Most of them weren't following a map into the unknown. They were creating the map as they went, with their own lives as the price of every mistake. So what finally changed? Not one invention, a slow convergence of several. The magnetic compass, first used for navigation in China roughly 1,000 years ago, finally gave travelers a reliable sense of direction that didn't depend on clear skies or memorized star patterns. No more losing your bearings under cloud cover. Then came more systematic surveying, actual measurement of land, using consistent units, cross-referenced from multiple points, rather than a single traveler's rough estimate. Then centuries later, the printing press. Suddenly, a map didn't have to be hand-copied by an exhausted scribe. It could be reproduced identically, thousands of times, with the same accuracy in every copy. Errors could finally be caught, corrected once, and fixed permanently across every version, instead of multiplying with every hand that touched it. And then the biggest leap of all, circumnavigation. Actual physical proof of the planet's true shape and scale, gathered by people who sailed all the way around it and came back to report what they'd found. Each of these wasn't just a technical improvement. Each one was a psychological earthquake, because each discovery didn't just add detail to the map. It kept revealing how wrong the previous map had been. Imagine spending your whole life believing a certain landmass existed, trusting it, planning around it, teaching it to your children, only to have an explorer return and calmly report that it was never there at all. Imagine the quiet vertigo of realizing your entire mental picture of the world, the one you inherited and trusted completely, was partly fiction. That happened to entire generations, repeatedly, for centuries. Here's where this story stops being about maps, because what you're really looking at is something deeper about human beings. For almost all of human history, people functioned, built empires, raised families, fought wars, fell in love, created civilizations, without knowing what their own world actually looked like. Without the full picture, working entirely off fragments, a memorized path, a myth disguised as directions, a copied map riddled with centuries-old mistakes. And they didn't just survive it, they built everything we have now on top of that uncertainty. Every trade route that fed a city, every unmarked border eventually formalized into a nation, every myth about the edge of the world that turned out to be someone's honest best attempt to explain the unknown rather than admit total ignorance. There's something almost unbearably human in that. We don't wait for certainty, we never have. We move forward with partial information, fill in the terrifying blank spaces with stories, and trust those stories enough to put one foot in front of the other. Every map you've ever used, from a Babylonian clay tablet to the glowing blue dot on your phone right now, is really the same act, repeated across thousands of years. Someone somewhere was brave enough or desperate enough to take one step into a place they'd never seen and try to bring back proof of what was actually there. So think again about that opening question. Draw your country. You can do it instantly now, because someone, generations before you, walked that coastline, measured that mountain range, sailed around that landmass, and came back to report the truth, often at extraordinary personal risk. You've never had to wonder what lies beyond the next hill. You've never had to trust a story about about a river that forks like a snake's tongue and hope the storyteller remembered it correctly. You've never had to stare at open ocean with nothing but starlight and wave patterns standing between you and being lost forever. But for almost the entire span of human existence, that wasn't a hypothetical. That was Tuesday. We think of maps as something we use, but maybe it's more accurate to say they're something we earned. One lost traveler, one impossible ocean crossing, one honest correction to an old mistake at a time. The next time your phone tells you exactly where you are, remember this. For most of human history, that single piece of certainty, simply knowing your place in the world, was one of the rarest and most hard-won pieces of knowledge a person could ever possess.